Omri, thanks for joining us. I do really appreciate it. So I'm the lead quantum recruiter at Barrington James, and I came across yourself a couple of weeks ago now whilst looking for an opportunity. And during the course of our conversation, it became quite apparent to me that we needed to sit down and have a much more longer format chat, because your story is certainly one that isn't typical in the quantum computing industry, and I think is one that a lot of us can learn from. So thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon, for giving us your time. And I guess I'd like to just pass over to you and let you introduce yourself and explain a bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, as you know, my name is Onri, and I come from a tribe. I grew up in a tribe here in the US. It's the largest Native American tribe, and it's called the Navajo tribe. So I'm a Navajo, 100%. And I grew up, I went through the entire tribal school system. The tribal school system is completely separate from the US, the traditional US school system. So we kind of have our own way of teaching things.
Okay.
And yeah, so and in that regard, we kind of have some amount of flexibility. And if you want someone who's specialized in a certain area, you could just simply invite them over, and there's somewhat less bureaucracy you have to deal with. And then the person can, talk to us. Person might be a local Native American who's got some special skill, something, and then they'll talk to us in the coursework. Yeah. So I went through that system, and then I was recruited to a laboratory outside of that, and outside the tribe, to a university, and they realized, or they recognized some of the machines that I built on my own, things like that. I would work on my own, like vacuum tube amplifiers, or I would work on power electronic tools, like power drills, things like that, or inverters, or vehicle electronics. That's a fun one, because we don't really have internet access. I grew up without the internet, you see.
Okay.
But we did have books and things like that we kind of have. It's limited. And then I use those books to I go through them, because there's not much else to read besides that. But in those books, there's documentation for how to repair or maintain vehicle electronics, things like that. And that was actually really helpful, and it's a way of sort of teaching myself. But I went on and I made these things work, and I try to put as much quality as I can, sometimes using something that's already pre-made. There's some part, very simple, I guess the word is rudimentary parts, things with very basic function that you don't have to build from scratch entirely. It's just needs to be done. Anyways, so I get that, put the whole thing together, it works. And then, so I try to take pictures of these things or draw them out or something. And so oftentimes people will come by, or they want to see what I built. And I say, oh, here it is, check it out. And then, that I guess the word travels far. as much as deep as I live in the wilderness, in the tribe, deep in the forest, or deep in the what is the word? It's kind of like between the desert and the mountains. That's where it is.
Okay.
It's in a place. It's very, very secluded. Anyways, but word travels far from there, and let's say the nearest town is like almost an hour away, and things like that. But still, there are people that know each other, and so as the word travels, it got to these universities, and then they came out to me and they said, "Hey, you should come work with us. We'll give you a scholarship." I was like, okay, if it's not too far, I'll be fine with that. I said, because they try to offer me to go to bigger universities that are really far away on the coastal areas, even like top universities, like Stanford, for example, which is like top tier in the US. But that's too far from where I live. And I said, I'm not ready for that. It's too far. I'm just going to put something close by, because all I know is tribal life, I don't know what it's like outside the tribe. It's different. So I'm going to have to spend some time learning how that works. So they eventually did. And then I met some professors there, made some friends with them. They didn't teach me things necessarily, but they had facilities that they have access to. And they said, we'll give you access to the facility and we'll train you and we'll put you in these programs if you want. I said, okay, I'll think about it. So I did. And I was a freshman at the time. So, but I had all these skills already. And
Hmm.
they said, but you could actually use this in research. It'll be pretty good. So I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I did. I went ahead and went forth with the training. And then I had mentors who were postdocs um, and so forth. I didn't really have that many graduate mentors, but mostly postdocs. Yeah. So
So what's that first experience like where somebody comes to you from outside of your, upbringing and your background and outside of the tribe and says, we want you to go to university? I mean, how does that work? What does that look like?
so basically someone gets in contact with the superintendent of the school system, and then the superintendent meets the school principal or something, and then they come directly to my classroom that I'm in elementary school or middle school or high school. It happens. And they just walk in and they say, hey, we want to talk with you. So they pick me out of the classroom and the teacher lets me leave. And they say, okay, that's fine. And then I leave and I talk with him at the office or somewhere like that. So that's that's how that situation works out.
Wow.
It's a little surreal because it's I've only seen things like this happen like in the movies or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's that's what it was like for me at least. But since then, um, I guess because of those little things that happen every now and then, the the teachers became familiar with that process. The teachers that I had in elementary and all the way to high school, they when they feel that I am needed somewhere outside of the classroom, they just say, "Okay, it's Onri. You can go ahead and go do what you need."
Okay.
So I would leave the classroom, and I would, give a talk somewhere outside of classroom during class time for a short period. Like
Hmm.
I'll have all my work done, and I say I have to go do something else. So yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
And is that, I mean, obviously I don't imagine it's common, right, for people to come in and offer full scholarships, but is it common for people to come in outside of the tribe and have conversations with people like yourself about what you're doing? Or is that new to everybody in that system? Or is that kind of, new to you, but familiar for other people around you?
It could be familiar with other people from other schools because I only went to technically two schools that were in the same area, you see.
Okay.
And the population is very small where I live. Like in my region, it's like 50 to maybe 100 people, like in my
Wow.
area, but over a large area, maybe like mm, 20 to 50 kilometers or so radius. So that area is not a lot of people. Like I live deep in the middle of nowhere, like I said. But
Mhm.
there there's a school system down in the valley, which is about 15 kilometers or so from where I live. And so in that school, we from kindergarten to eighth grade, it's middle school and elementary combined. But in that school, there's about maybe 200 students or so, at least when I was going to school there. And you see, the high school is actually just up the road from that. And that high school had a maximum of like 70 students or so. That was
Wow.
Red Valley Cove High School. And my graduating class was 10 people. So
Okay.
I, and this was in the mountain area. So it doesn't matter if what rank you are in the class. If you say, I graduated, top 10, you could be the last rank and be top 10. So yeah, but that's, that's, I would say that gives the opportunity for people to experience something not as much as elsewhere. I guess elsewhere it's probably more common because there's more people there. The population's denser in other schools, likely. And for that reason, the the opportunities that they have as far as like people coming in and talking to them about uh scholarship resources, things like that, it might change because I haven't been to that school in ages, you see. But
Okay.
it's still in contact with the teachers there in Red Valley, Arizona, which is kind of in that area where I grew up. And that's where the school's located, both schools, high school and elementary.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, the I guess the connections have grown since I've left the place, but I would think that the opportunities in this case these days they try to locate it, or they try to keep it within the tribe.
Mm.
And then if it grows to something, and then they can take the next step and go beyond the tribe after that. Yeah.
Okay.
So they have like we have our own tribal scholarship system, so to speak. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So you reached out to you by these professors. That people are aware of what you're doing in kind of traditional electronics, for better want of a phrase. And then you end up in this position where you're thinking about going to university. For most people, and I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody coming out of the British education system, so I don't know necessarily if this translates to America, but from my experience, that for most people is a very stressful time. You're not sure if that's what you want to do. You're not sure if you're going to get the grades that are necessary to go to the university you want, to get onto the course that you're thinking of. You're worried that you're leaving your friends that you've been to sixth form with and you've built these relationships with. And so for you, I imagine you have a completely different set of considerations, and still some of those similar fears, definitely, I'm sure. But the things that you're thinking about are so much maybe more impactful to your life than the things that I would have been considering at that point in my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's that like? I mean, what's your decision-making process in that period? What kind of things are going through your head?
So, I mean, situation that for us is like, what's the living situation like? That always comes up. And what happens if I leave my home is the other thing, because we have tribal home and such. So like, who's going to take care of that? I legitimately asked these questions to the folks that trying to bring me out of the tribe, and I had to say no in the beginning. These opportunities, they continue to come, and I know they will come. And I tried to teach my friends that opportunities are not necessarily like once in a lifetime. That's not a good mindset to have. I don't think they will come. They will keep coming. So you just keep doing what you're doing. But this is a mindset that I had as a child. So I just said, well, maybe, I need age right now. I'm too young for this. Like as a child, what am I supposed to do outside of the tribe? Like, who's going to watch over me? That's the other thing. And people use a different kind of English, because we use on the countryside, we use very simple English. And the English that people use in the city area where the universities are located, I don't understand half of what they're saying. That kind of thing. The slang terms, things like that. So that is still actually the same case when I came to Minneapolis. I don't understand half of what people are saying out here. I actually have to look things up and then keep trying to learn new words that people are using out here on this side of the country. So same case when I was a child. I actually had a little book with me. It was a small composition notebook that I carried in my pocket. And my elementary teachers probably would remember that, because that's something I had me all the time. This is like way before YouTube was around. But there was a little notebook, kind of like this thing I have in my pocket. It's like a little notebook. I can turn the pages, write down my thoughts, things that I considered would be critical in the long term, that someone might ask me of, because my friends come to me when they want to find something else, or if they want to solve some kind of mechanical issue. How do we achieve this goal? And it might not necessarily be like, oh, help me solve my math problems kind of thing. It's not theoretical like that. It's more like, I need to fix this thing on my broken device, or I need to fix this. I don't know, there's something wrong with my measuring tools or something. And then say, well, let's look at it, and I'll have some notes on it. So things like that. And those resources, I kind of made my own little resources over time. And that helped me a lot. So as I'm going through from one side of the tribe and then slowly starting to leave the tribe, I try to keep notes of these things. What are the possibilities? What's the population like? What is some common good things and bad things about the university environment, things like that. So I'll try to learn these things on my own and then try to make a decision. And for that reason, I cannot make a fast decision. Like if you told me to make a decision overnight or immediately, that's not possible.
Okay.
I need time. And so as a child, it took me a long time to make those decisions. Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
that's just note taking.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's a skill that we've all had at one point or another, but I think a lot of people lose along the way. You become so engrossed in, having your mobile phone immediately available to answer any question that
Right.
you kind of forget to think for yourself a little bit. And I'm definitely guilty of that. And I think, having the sense of mind at a very young age to be able to be aware of your own thoughts, to be aware of the fact that you need a bit more life experience, and to, annotate that, I think is very, very impressive. What's it like when you kind of first get to university? What's your sort of first day? What's your impressions? What are you thinking?
Okay, so I do get to the university, I show up, and then I kind of actually just sit there in silence, because I've done that for a long time in the mountains. You just kind of sit there and you just absorb the environment, so to speak. You just sit there blissfully in some sense. Kind of like you're meditating, because my grandmother and we used to meditate in the mountains, deep in the forest, way up there. And this is like 3,000 meters, so like just under 3,000 meters above sea level. There's a mountain. There's another mountain peak that's like a little over 3,000 meters, but there's another one, a little area below that, still pretty high. We go there, we meditate, but I take those same practices, bring it to the university, and I just kind of meditate there for a bit, and then I try to observe what the place is like. You see. And the university the first one I went to was in Utah, actually. And this was in the southern part of Utah State University. It was a branch campus, and it happened to be located also in it's far out enough that it's somewhat close to my home, like at least an hour from my home. That's the closest university I could get that's outside with resources that I could use, like in the physics, domain. But there were like landscapes in that area, different kind of canyons, rock formations, things that I'm somewhat familiar with. It's just that it's not red. Like where I live, it's red rocks and stone and such. And then, so basically me getting there, the first experience is just absorbing the environment, and also observing the social situation. The thing is, it's so quiet where I live that I'm used to that quietness, right? And there's this thing I cannot really get rid of. It is when I hear people talking out in the open, I hear everyone's conversations, and it's just something I cannot stop. I just hear what everyone's talking about. So that was what happened to me. So I'm just generally observing the environment, but then I go to a place like the cafeteria area where people are eating and such. And I sit there, I try to do, play around with my computer that I had. And then I would hear people's conversations and what people are talking about. I was like, oh, I see. And, I start socializing from there. But that's
Yeah.
just how it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get. So it's another thing that again, my experience growing up was so different, right? Because you're going through public school and you're talking to people all day, and you're going past, however many hundreds of people on a daily basis that you're never going to interact with, but who you pass for a fleeting moment, and that becomes so natural for me, and it becomes so normal. And you do have the ability, or you at some point you gain the ability to be able to turn off the background noise and almost be present within an environment where there is a lot going on. But for you, obviously, that's a brand new experience, I guess, and something which is quite challenging to get over. One thing we haven't touched on, which I'm really curious about, of all the things that you could have gone to university to study, quantum computing is what you're studying now and where you've ended up. How did you first come about quantum computing? What's that conversation like where somebody brings that up to you?
So, okay. So at home, I had somewhat of an encyclopedia, right? So the encyclopedia is what I had access to. We had one at school too. It's called the World Book Encyclopedia. And I was like, how do I genuinely asked people around, like, how does a person like me get a hold of this kind of resource, of an encyclopedia at my own home? Because I have shelves, and those shelves, they have some, it's just filled with nonfiction stuff. For some reason, I'm not really a fiction guy. But anyways, I was like, how do I do that? But then by chance, actually, I was shopping with my grandmother one day at a secondhand store. This store is located in a place called Durango, Colorado. It's like 3 hours from where I live. You just keep driving into this place in a different state. And while I was shopping there was an encyclopedia disc on a CD-ROM. It was called Encarta Encyclopedia 96. I was like, oh, is it like 96, like the date, like the year I was born, or is it like what is that? Anyways, I was like, how was there an encyclopedia on this disc, like an entire set of the encyclopedia? I wasn't sure if that was possible because this is all new to me. I did happen to have a desktop computer that we just bought from someone off this at some marketplace. Like we have some marketplaces on the tribe here and there.
Okay.
Yeah, but the things you find there is mostly food. Occasionally you find definitely you always find people selling like tires and such. But one of those things someone happens to sell once in a while is just like some computers. And we bought one. It was like a Micron, it said Micron PC something, but it was like a Windows XP system on that computer. So just enough. And I think it was actually upgraded from a Windows 98 because there was a 98 sticker on it. But anyways, I loaded the thing on there, and that encyclopedia, actually, I learned a lot from it. And that encyclopedia is something that I use to explore things. And I was like, this is great. There actually is an encyclopedia here. And that was my internet, actually. So there were like videos on there, actually, videos, GIFs, little animations. I was like, this is great. And I would explore different topics. And there were actually topics relevant to quantum computing on there. But it didn't necessarily explicitly mention quantum computing in the encyclopedia, but there were things related to it, like atomic clocks, for example, and different quantum sensors, and like nuclear physics, like related topics. Nuclear, like where I live, actually has a lot of nuclear history, so there's definitely a part in that because where I live, we have a history with uranium and uranium mining and extraction. My grandfather, my mother's father, my grandfather, he was a uranium miner.
Wow.
He was a Navajo veteran, but also a uranium miner during the Cold War era. And so there's like the whole thing that my people have a history with uranium mining. and extraction, things like that. Very, very controversial. But, or should I say, it's not just controversial, but it's also, it's kind of dark because, thousands of people died from that. But
Yeah.
they try to teach us early on in elementary school that these things exist in our environment. And you have to be careful when you're playing outside because it's literally like we step outside and there's canyons.
Yeah.
That's how it is when you live on the countryside. You open a door, canyons, or you open a door, mountains, and big things like that. So it's just very, very open world. It looks like you're from what I've heard people describe it to me, they say that it looks like you're living in a national park. That's how they describe it to me. And so I was like, you know what? Actually, that makes sense. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't speak to these people.
Yeah.
who are seeing it from the outside perspective. Anyways, so that resource, one thing leads to another. They're all kind of interconnected in some sense. So it all leads back to research. And it made sense to me. I was like, you know what, all of this is connected through physics. It actually makes sense. And so that slowly led me from like topics of nuclear physics and then quantum. But I didn't fully understand quantum at the time. So I just like, I'm going to have to put this aside for now. Maybe I'll come back to it later. So that actually is what happened. And it did happen. And so that's where I am currently. I went from working on general topics, and then I worked on electric vehicles. I built electric vehicles for a research laboratory for some professors. And I taught people how to build those things, using physics principles. And then from there, slowly, they put me into nanotechnology, but more like nanoelectronics. There's nanotechnology, as you know, it's a general topic, but under it, there's nanoelectronics. Under that is spintronics, quantum spintronics. Spintronics is just another term for spin transport electronics. You're using spin transport, which is, a way of controlling things inside of metals, things like that. It could be semiconductors too, but for at least for my work, we use metals. And then somehow that's connected to quantum computing because there are kind of qubits that exist, the platforms, the spin qubits that use those mechanisms. And so that's inherently connected with this work. So all these things, like I said, they just go down this sort of almost like a dampening path. There's a dampening happening, and then you slowly zoom in, and then boom, you're in this area. And now I'm doing quantum, and all this was just a matter of time, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting comment and perspective. But I think as much as it's a matter of time, you're also a product in of yourself. What I mean by that is that anybody could have had the same amount of time, but I don't think many people would have pursued their own intuition, their own interests, their own curiosity to the extent at which you've done, which has brought you to this point. I think you're quite unique in that. I think there's not many people who would have the same drive to understand what they're reading in that encyclopedia.
Right. But the thing is, you kind of have to be aware of your learning modes. So I would say, at least for me, I'm not a visual learner.
Okay.
And for that reason, you see those encyclopedia texts and things like that. They had diagrams and they had like audio to go with the explanations of animations, things like that. So that is helpful because I realized actually I'm an auditory learner. I learn by hearing and listening. And that's actually something I learned if you take another step back, something I learned from my grandmother. So I was raised by people, by elders in the community. I wasn't raised by my parents. So these elders, they were born in like the 1920s and 1930s.
Wow.
So the things that I learned, the skills that I have, some of those things are passed down from these Navajo elders. like elderly, but they're elderly, but they're not the elderly that you think of, like the kind you walk across the street kind of thing. These
Mhm.
are like they could be 70 years old and running up the mountains. These people are well built
Mm.
mountain people. And my grandmother was one of those people. So she was a very tough individual in her 70s even. So she moved around like a young person, very flexible. Actually, she was more flexible than I was because she was, she could like touch the floor with the palm of her hand without bending her knees. Yeah, that kind of girl.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And we live in a house with stairs, and she was always running up and down, lifting. So that imagine having that, and then the wealth of experiences that we had and our conversations. That's how our relationship was. Because I was raised by my grandmother.
Mhm.
Our relationship was that we go and do work, we socialize, we come back home, keep working, and we talk and we have discussions. My grandmother and I, as little as I was. So because it was just for a long time, uh, in my younger days. I mean, my grandfather actually, he passed like 2 years before I was born, so I didn't get to meet him. So it's just me and my grandmother, and I learned a lot by having these conversations with my grandmother.
Mm.
And then she would go and actually have me meet. She'll take me with her and go meet people in the community here and there because she knew a lot of people. My grandmother
Mm.
community, Navajo community, and we went far and wide. And I met all kinds of people, and so there were people that knew me, but I don't know them. And the time that I met them, I was pretty young, but still, as I kept growing, I have more and more conversations with these people, with the Navajo community, and I learn back and forth. I listen as much as I can,
Mm.
take that knowledge in, and I keep I just slowly collect all of it. So that's something I'm somewhat doing these days, even outside of the tribe. I have
I see.
conversations with people, like as I think I mentioned it to you before. 4 hours at a time, I
Mm.
would have a conversation with someone who is, you know, who wants to talk about something.
Mm.
So that's how it is. And then I take that inspiration over to the the study. When I want to study something, I try to I try to look into who's involved in that kind of research work, you know, kind of backtrack the history of the technology, things like that. So it's just one thing,
Interesting.
like I said, is connected to the other. So you can make
Yeah.
a work, I guess.
Again, what strikes me, Henri, is how aware you are of your own abilities, and like not. I don't think again many people have that. I mean, I can only speak from my own experience and growing up
Right.
through school, and I'm very much the same. I'm not a visual learner, but I didn't realize that until much later in my life than I think you did, and I think it would have been helpful for me to have known that quite a bit sooner. But I didn't have the state of mind to recognize that at such a young age. It's one of those things I've learned through experience, and I've learned by trying different methods what works best for me. And
Mm,
I'd very much agree. I need to see things written down on paper, or better yet, put pen to paper myself, and then I can really start to understand something. Um, but it's interesting to me that you had a grasp of that so early on in your development. So to where you are now, then, so you're at university, you're
mm,
specifically looking at nanoelectronics, and within that spintronics, is that right?
mm. Yeah.
So talk to me about what it is you're doing. You're doing a PhD currently. You're 2 years in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Expand on that a little bit. Tell me about what you're doing, what you want to kind of conclude your PhD with.
Okay. So I've actually been doing this since my undergraduate. So when I came as an undergraduate, I was like a sophomore, and I was like, spintronics. They actually gave a list of nanoelectronic topics. It was a research fellowship. It was called Research Experiences for Undergraduates (REU), that is funded by the National Science Foundation, and otherwise known as NSF. And in that program, they basically trained us for 10 months in the laboratory. They have a set of funding put aside for us. And the funding is allocated for living expenses, is allocated towards research supplies and some other miscellaneous things. And the research supplies is a huge part of it because, it costs money to use the laboratory equipment, some of these special machines that cost like hundreds of dollars an hour, for example. So we use that, that's pretty good because if you have a set funding that's not necessarily from a professor, but it's from a different organization that's taking care of that, then the professor's like, okay, well, we'll give you some permission. They sign some paper, they have you work in the laboratory, and then you explore. So I was like, I want to build stuff because like I'm obsessed in some sense with building things. In my tribe, I did carpentry. In my first days, I built electric vehicles, and I'm still building things. I like to continue building things, even though some people consider it a pain. They don't really want to. Some people don't really want to do it. They kind of like, I don't want to build stuff. Let someone else do it.
Yeah,
But I'm the dude. Like, I want to build it. I'm happy to do it. Doesn't matter. It comes out right. I'll learn something, and then I'll rebuild it again. We can do that in a short period of time. So that's what I did. I focused on the nanofabrication aspect of this quantum technology, the spintronics. And then I used the machines, the research funding and all that. And then that led even more to working like on some other spintronics topic another year later. So I did that fellowship for 1 year, and then 10 weeks for 1 year, and then 10 weeks the next year, did it again. I wasn't a student, but then on the second year that passed, I was like, you know what, I'll join the university. And so I did. I joined the university as a student officially, and then I used that to kind of stick around a bit more formally in some sense. And then explore spintronics, even with, as an undergraduate, stick around with the graduates and learn what they're learning. So that kind of spilled on over to my PhD research, because now I'm doing PhD work. The PhD is still in spintronics, but in an area that I feel comfortable contributing in. And I was like, you know what? This is great. I have some experience in working or studying on the topic of quantum computing, because during the pandemic, it was actually a really hard decision. I was like, there's so much going on in the world right now. It's uncertain, right? So I'd like to do something on my free time. Like I still have my side projects, my hobbies and such, but academic wise, what do I do? I actually took 1 semester off because of the pandemic, but in that time, I actually did join a program that was called Qubit by Qubit. And that was together, they were collaborating with IBM, MIT, and I think University of Oxford, some instructors. So those were our instructors in that program. And they taught us for 1 year for that semester and then in the following semester. And I learned as much as I could. I have this book, this sort of set of notes in a book that I call my IBM notes. IBM notes. Everything is that I learned as I could is written on there. And then, so I was like, I think, I build quantum devices, and this is something I want to work towards. And I think we could merge spintronics with it and use our spintronics technology, our magnetics expertise in our research group, and then use that for my PhD research. So I put that forth to my professor, and he's like, yeah, that's a good idea, Professor Jianping Wang. So we are currently working on that topic, and everything's sort of lined up right now. I have all my little drawings, presentations. We often give long presentations in their PhD research, but that's just how the program goes. You will give these like you want to explore something or you want to learn something deeply, you explore it sort of on your own, or at least you try to seek as much as you can. You might end up talking to someone to learn more deeply on a topic, a subtopic. And then you bring that together and you put it in this long presentation that's anywhere from like 30 slides up to maybe 60 slides or something. So you do that, you bring it together in a presentation format, could be on Zoom. We actually used to do presentations in person, but this time it's all on Zoom anyways. But I try to incorporate as many pictures as I can, talk about these topics. And then actually everyone that's attending the presentation, they are postdocs, they are PhD students, they are some undergraduates in there. And so everyone kind of puts their brains together and they ask me questions, which makes me explore more. And sometimes I'll have the answer ready. It's already there. But then there are questions that I'm just like, sometimes be like, well, let's explore the answer on that one. Because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. We'll have to have a side discussion about it. And then we find the answer. But that's how it goes in the program. And then of course, coursework is just a standard thing. But yeah.
So when you refer to you've referred to we as part of the program, who are you referring to when you refer to we?
Oh, we as in PhD students.
Okay.
PhD researchers. It's actually kind of hard to say just PhD student, because I think in some PhD programs they're not doing there's some that are not research oriented or something, or some other doctoral program it's not necessarily research oriented, or it could be research oriented but you're not doing like working on you're not building things.
Sure.
Or you could be just working on a computer or something, that kind of thing. So it's when I say we, I'm just like experimental folks who are exploring these topics and presenting. Yeah. I suppose in other PhD programs that are non-engineering or non-physics, they might do it a little different. So yeah, when I say we, at least the EE PhDs.
Okay.
So let's see. I think there's something else I wanted to say on that. The other thing is we have like subtopics or subpapers or papers under technical papers under those subtopics. I guess if you were to ask what specifically is my research work, then it would be in the area of what is called magnetic random access memory, using a special kind of MTJ that has quantum materials in it. I want to say the materials, but it's way too technical. These are just memory architectures that we build out of nanomagnets that are made of metals or metals, metal oxides, metalloids. Yeah, that kind of thing. And then we build it so that it's cryogenically compatible. So in other words, it's a cryogenic magnetic random access memory. That's what the work is on. And the interface with qubits, spin qubits that are based off of magnetics as well. So magnetic spintronic qubits. Yep. If you're asking specifically, a little more specifically, what is it on? That's it.
That's it. And how far into your PhD program are you?
So right now, I'm about to finish this is the second year, and this is the end of the first semester of the second year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So 2.5.
2.5. It's a good way of putting it. Well, how long left have you got? Have you got another 2.5 years to go, you think?
Yeah, so it's going to take, this PhD program lasts anywhere from 4 to 5 years. Okay. Yeah, so that's the length of the program. Yep. So, but it's a little shortened for me compared to someone who's completely new to spintronics or new to the fabrication techniques or all that stuff. because usually you would have to spend an extra year learning how to build these nano chips
Mhm.
that are really dense. They're not just single devices with wires on it, which is what you can do in physics because all you care about is the physics. But in our case, it's engineering, so we have to expand that and make it into a dense array of devices,
Mm.
which in itself presents its own problems that you have to solve on your own. You have to learn. I mean, it's all about learning. So, yeah.
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 Okay. So, looking forward, then, let's assume we've fast forwarded another 2.5 years, and you're finishing your PhD. What do you want to do at that point?
So, there's two things. So I have a side project going on.
Okay.
It's currently going on, and this side project involves it's more on the quantum education side. And
Okay.
as a Native American, as an Indigenous American with Indigenous resources and all this stuff in my head,
Mhm.
and my digital brain, as I call it, which is my brain, all my thoughts that have been recorded and written down and things like that over the years onto a digital form or a cloud notebook of sorts called Google Keep. So this thing, I have all these linguistics resources that I put on there, some that I've made on my own. I form the resources. I create the repositories in like GitHub or something.
Mhm.
And so this is a side project of mine that has actually reached out, has gone far back to my homeland. So people hear about it there from the university, Arizona State University, the Northern Arizona universities. And so the organization leaders for the quantum research and also the quantum education, they said, we would like to get involved. And I said, that's great.
Yeah.
Because even though it's a side project, this is actually a lifelong side project for me because
Mhm.
I want to take this knowledge, this quantum technology knowledge that is pretty up to date, and I want to transcribe it or translate it into the Navajo language, my native language, my
Wow.
indigenous for my tribe. And so I've done some of that already, and I understand some linguistic aspects of the Navajo language. And this is, I think, worth doing because we did not have a written language in the past. Yeah, all of our language was done by memory and it was spoken. And as a result, the way we spell things now that we have a written form, it's kind of like a Latinized form, but we modify the Latin characters, kind of like English letters, but it's
Okay.
modified to match the sounds that we want it to make.
Yeah.
Now, lots of consonant clusters, glottal stops, things like that, all these different tones. So that is very phonetic. So pretty much you think about something and you say it. And if what you say matches the written form, the newly written form, then it's pretty straightforward from there. But then that's only on the aspect of pronunciation and writing. As far as the meaning goes, you can break down the meaning because there are words that we can create and invent for new things that exist in society, in modern society. Like, for example, we didn't have computers. This is something actually I learned from my grandmother. She's like, we didn't have computers in the past, right? And I was like, okay. And then she says, so what we say in Navajo is that the computer is a piece of copper that thinks. It's a thinking, it's a thinking
Okay. Yeah.
a copper thinking, copper piece of copper that's thinking, something like that. So in Navajo language, that's how we describe it. We say, bish lachit sakese. So bish is metal, lachit is red. So bish lachit, red metal, is copper. You can actually break these things down kind of like a tree or a fractal. And then sakes, that means to think. And when you add the I at the end, you're kind of attributing that value to whatever it is you're attributing to. Could be a person or a thing. Yeah. So you can actually use that to personify objects that are not usually animated. you can pretend as if it's animated, as if it's alive.
Yeah.
Which translates over to quantum really well, because the way we treat qubits, they're physical objects, but they can resonate and they can respond to a signal. They can respond to a frequency, and they're kind of like they echo it back in some sense, and that's almost as if it's alive, even though it's not. So these things are just kind of like concepts that overlap. Anyways, so what I'm trying to do is take that knowledge as much as I can, put it into these linguistics repositories and expand it from there. And I think already there are some Navajos out there who are already, they're really good at like computer science, I guess. And they're trying to work on creating a sort of program that can listen. I guess it's something like machine learning that can take audio signals and then or even I guess like computer vision programs that can read words and then try to translate it into Navajo, automated in an automated fashion.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, look, there's a lot of challenges to that, I think, but it makes sense. I get one of the questions for me: how you mentioned that the Navajo language until recently was just formulated from memory. So how much of the quote unquote traditional Navajo language is now put down in a linguistic form? Have you got a strong base to work from, or are you still adding?
It's hard to say. I've only spoken to so many thousands of Navajo people, and there's many Navajo people out there. Some far south or far west. Actually, we have Navajo dialects. That's the other thing.
Okay.
So the dialect of Navajo that I understand and I speak is from the eastern, like northeastern part of the tribe. And like the way I spell the H, for example, like the Navajo is spelled with the H. I try to keep it as phonetic as possible. Navajo or Nabeho, as we pronounce it, Navajo. If you want to stay neutral, as neutral as possible, you would just say Dine, which is like, well, represents the Navajo people or the Navajo language, Dinebizad. So there is another Navajo spelling that has a J on it, but the J spelling is not a J in the English spelling of the word. However, we don't pronounce the J as a ho in Navajo. That's incorrect. So that inspiration of the J came from somewhere else, likely from down south, which is actually where our Navajo government's located. It's on the southern part of the tribe, the central government, I should say. Yeah. But regardless, there are different ways people spell and pronounce things throughout the tribe. And actually, you can backtrack the way it's spelled. Like, I've explained this to some folks, some friend groups of mine, that actually there's this thing called oak, the word for oak, like a rock. It's a wood, it's a plant that's hard like a rock. It's really dense. So, in other words, in Navajo, we just call it a rocky plant.
It's very logical.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the word for rock is tse. It's like TSE, and it's a consonant cluster. Tse, that means rock, and then chil is plants. So tsechil. But see, that's logical and it makes sense. You can actually break it down.
Yeah.
But if you go to a different part of the tribe, they'll say chechil, or something like that. And they spell it with a CH. But the thing is, you can't really backtrack that. If you do backtrack it, it's just going to bring you back to se. So I guess, yeah, I don't know where that, where that thing kind of went somewhere. Maybe someone can explain it to me, but that's how I've been able to, understand some spellings and what makes them different. in the tribe. Yeah. And also the other thing is when I go to a different part of the tribe as well, sometimes people say something in Navajo. I understand what it means, but it just sounds really funny to my ears. But they make up their own terms there in that region. So
Yeah.
you actually have to collectively go out there and collect your own data and then bring it back, centralize everything, identify which is which. So that's like one of my long-term plans. And that's beyond PhD, right? And bring that together with quantum and eventually allow that for young people to not only learn the Navajo language a bit more deeper for themselves, and but also to help them get involved in quantum industry, because this is the future, right?
Yeah.
This is something the efficiency in it as well. There's efficiency in the learning as well, because the effort you have to put into it is pretty much straightforward to the fundamental principles. Whereas if you were studying like chemistry or something, for example, you study it really deeply, but the deeper you go, it just leads into quantum eventually. And then you end up with quantum chemistry. And then same with physics, Newtonian physics. And then you keep studying it deeper and deeper, at least within a certain scale, I guess you would say. It just takes you into quantum. So the end point is your quantum.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Quantized. So in that case, I think because of that perspective of learning efficiency and also linguistics, bring it together, it's going to do something. I have a vision for that, right?
I think that's that's just to pause there. I think that's a really interesting point you've just made, and one which I'd thought about, but not in the way that you've just put it to me. That
Right.
Everything kind of has its origins there, and so if you can transcribe, for better want of a word, the quantum into Navajo, you're allowing people not only to learn the native language and get to grips with that from a young age and keep that alive to some extent, I'm sure, but you're also giving them a foundation for learning, whether that's quantum or whether that's chemistry, physics, biology, whatever it is they go on to do. There's a foundation there they can build from. And I think that's a fantastic project. Who's helping you with that? Is this you yourself and you?
This was my own effort, and I just started publishing it on GitHub. And I was like, I have, because it didn't start in GitHub. Like I said, I have a Google Keep notebook, notebook of all these thoughts, all these ideas, and my own resources. And then I have resources here on my computer for that I've stored and collected. So it was like a whole library built into this thing. But I was like, I wanted, maybe people would be interested in reading this. And I think also it helps me learn, because what I want to do is I want to learn the Navajo language as deep as I can, because I understand it to an extent, even some of the old words and things like that. But it's very fascinating to me as an indigenous person, and I'd like to get more associated with it. I'm just interested in it, but I think that I can combine it with other things too, and that kind of makes it worthwhile, and it adds to its value in some sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, so with that in mind, there were actually people. See, I've shared this stuff on LinkedIn, and that's a whole nother thing I could talk about, is that me sharing things online has really changed a lot of things, because I'm new to the internet, as I said. And I've been on the internet since 2017, officially. I've actually experienced it a little bit, kind of just searching up something on the browser and then downloading an image in elementary school for a project. And that was it. Nothing. That's all I did. I was like, oh, look, an image, download it, get it done. No more, nothing more. And, but when I did come to the internet officially in 2017 and got internet access on my mobile device, I don't have internet access in Arizona at my house because I haven't been back home since that time. I've been out
Wow.
here. I went to Utah, went back briefly, and then I came here to Minneapolis, and I've been here since. I haven't been back home. So the what do you call it? This resource, which is all connected on the internet, I was like, well, perhaps I can learn how to use it strategically. So GitHub is one of them. But the thing is, you can share GitHub repositories with people. And so I did that. I put it on LinkedIn. There were some folks who were familiar with my work, and I guess they thought of other programs that could actually benefit from that in Arizona. And so we got in contact, and so I ended up meeting the associate vice president of Arizona State University. And I also met with some other leaders from Northern Arizona University, like I said. And so they said they expressed interest in this project of mine. And they realized the significance of it. And I said, yeah, I think that'll be good. That'll be great. And so we're forming an official sort of project start off. And I'm supposed to go to Texas this December, next month. So it's the first time I'm officially leaving Minnesota for a while.
Wow.
For like 2 days and then coming back. So never been to Texas, but I get there, I will meet these people, and we'll talk about this project, the side project, which is somewhat related to my work, but still, it's inherently, connected to me because it's my language, my people.
Yeah.
And well, they said, well, let's see what we can do with this, because there's something, this as you meant, they realized that, or should I say, they acknowledged that I said it's a lifelong side project. Yeah. So that, if anything, if you're asking, it is becoming an official project.
Well, I'm glad. I think it's something, I think that's a fantastic initiative, and I'm glad that you're getting help with it. I think that it's a project which is probably too big for one person, even over a lifetime. So I'm glad that you're getting support. But I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I wish you all the best in that pursuit.
Thanks. The thing is, I'm obsessed about these things. Like, there are certain things I have obsessions about, and I think having an obsession about certain things really cuts the work in half, actually. So, like, quantum is one thing I'm obsessed about. Fractals is another thing I'm obsessed about. And linguistics is another thing I'm obsessed about. So that actually, as much work as this would take for one person, it's a little less by having that obsession with it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's healthy obsession, right? It's something that
it's a healthy. Yes, I actually should clarify that. It's the healthy obsession.
Yeah. But no, I think that's very, very. I think that's very wise. I think that's the word I would use. I think it is a very wise project. I really see the value in that, and I commend you for. It's one thing to put yourself in the position where you are now, having come from the background that you have, to be able to understand quantum and to continue to be working in that field, but then to not be just content with you understanding it, but wanting to share that and to educate other people from a similar background, I think is very, very impressive. And so again, unfortunately, there's not much I can do to help you with that particular project. My Navajo is not up to scratch, but I wish you all the best with it. I think that's a fantastic initiative.
I mean, I think that also helps people from outside of the U.S., or should I say, outside of the tribe, because even people in the U.S., they're not, the way they're educated about us indigenous people and our languages, our tribe. Like, we have hundreds of indigenous languages that are indigenous to America in general, but there are people who are unaware about that. And I think this would also help in that general direction for people to understand that we have indigenous people that speak a language that's been here for thousands of years. And we're also capable of doing these things as well.
Yeah.
Creating our own resources. Yeah. So
And I think it's not just that you have it's not just that there are indigenous languages that have been in America, but
yeah,
there's indigenous languages which are in America that are still being
yes,
used and still being developed and
definitely.
still, growing today.
Yes.
I think that's an important distinction as well. We're not talking about something which has been. We're talking about something which is happening,
Oh
now
yeah,
and very much in the present.
definitely. Yeah.
So
So
that's side project one. That was the
yeah,
first thing you mentioned.
yeah,
let's
exactly.
let's go back. What's kind of the second thing? The question I asked was at the end of your PhD, what are you looking to do? And that was the lifelong side project you mentioned.
Yeah.
What in addition to that are you looking to do as well?
So the other project or mm, thing that I want to work on is it's on the hardware side. So
Mhm.
this is yet another side project, but still, there's another project that involves giving access nanotechnology resource hardware access, resources to the general quantum nanotechnology community. This also could include, tribal education as well,
Mhm.
based on the low cost and the compactness. So it's a whole open source project that I have where you're taking knowledge of nanofabrication and then trying to do it with low cost, like on a tabletop, like basically almost like you're making your own small little baking station in a sense, but then all these things are contained within a small footprint, hardware footprint, and the lithography technology for that is also low cost because it's based off of, well, it's based off of laser technology that you would find in in something like Blu-ray lasers or something. And these things are pretty common and cheap and they're small. So you could actually somewhat reverse engineer these things and build it into a small lithography system, and then it could grow. So that's open source. And what I want to do is bring that and then make it official, and then people could learn hardware from that on their own. And then, so this is something I had discussed with the professors from Arizona as well, and they're pretty happy about it. So I mean, given the fact that it's open source, I don't think I would have a problem talking about it in public, even
Mm.
now. So I mean, the whole point is that you need to have a certain kind of skill set to actually build this kind of thing and make it work in a small footprint. But the thing is, doing it open source as well is its own thing. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's another side project I got going on. But beyond this side project, there is a main project, I guess you would call it, which is trying to create a system, a quantum computing system that has that same mindset, which is, or should I say, it's based on the same principles. That is, trying to deal or handle the densities, the high densities of signals in a quantum system, using something like fiber optics to reduce the cable noise, for example, and then actually exploiting those on a set of devices that are quantum,
Mhm.
qubits, the memory and so forth, all these things, but making it more compatible with each other. And as a result, having the ability to reduce the footprint as well. So the system doesn't necessarily have to be bulky, but you could make it smaller and smaller and still have the same, more or less the same performance. And then the materials people can come in and improve the performance of the material interfaces to to their content. And also, it allows people who are working on specialized qubits to actually test it on a platform that is based off of spin transport mechanisms, things
Mhm.
like that. So that's something I got going on in the long term. That's somewhat a part of my PhD project, but I think that's, like I said, it would be difficult to achieve in a short time period within just one PhD.
Yep.
This is something it would take years to do, and I think it's possible because I build these things myself. Uh, but the thing is, it's not only just that I can build it myself. I'm able to actually densify the structures on my own using these techniques. Um, well, that's based off of spin rather than charge.
Mhm.
So as a result, there's less energy required overall. There's this better efficiency,
Mhm.
not just in the energy efficiency, but also the size efficiency. Yeah.
Yep.
So that is something I would also probably, it would probably merge somewhat with the work that I'm doing at a place of my choosing. So if I
Mhm.
get recruited to different laboratories, so I've had people try to, pull me in different directions, say work with us at their laboratory. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and they were familiar with my skills, and they said, you should come build quantum computers with us. And I was really, really, really excited about that. But then I've also had the university come and talk to me and to say, you should consider a PhD because I think you could do it in a relatively short amount of time and then still be able to go and work. And so I said, you know what? I'll have to think about that. Bring up an interesting option here. So that's the option I took. It wasn't an easy choice, but I took that option, you see. And what I'd like to do as far as industry work is just take these resources, expand on them, and then train people. So this training, this working with engineers really requires a lot of leadership. And so I happen to have a lot of leadership experience in research environments and somewhat out of the research environment as well, because I have some other side activities, extracurricular activities. um, so it could be like directorship or something of that nature is where that's where I'm going. And I see that in the long term, and that's the vision right now.
Mhm.
And it's going to require, some getting together, getting people together, which is not always easy because sometimes you have to bring people over from who are halfway across the world to work on those projects with you.
Yep.
Because I actually do meet a lot of people who want to work with me on an idea, either that I'm currently working on or something that they want to expand on, which is related to mine, and they merge the two together. So the thing is, they might be way on the other side of the country, or they might be somewhere on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
I've actually done that with a friend of mine. We were friends on the internet, and he lived in Europe. And then we expressed interest in all this research work in spintronics. And this friend of mine was like, I'd like to get involved officially because I have a degree somewhat related, a STEM degree, a master's degree, but I'd like to actually do a PhD in that area. So how do I do this? So I put him in contact with my professor, and then we work things out. And so my friend, he's like a real friend of mine,
Mhm.
actually came here and joined us, and so now we're in the same research team, and it's things like that. That took a lot of effort, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like a long-term vision or long-term idea involved, but then I guess doing it in industry might be, I don't know how easy or how much easier or how much more difficult that would be, but that's something I would like to have the power or the authority to achieve, because ultimately these ideas and being able to do these things requires people and
Yep.
skills. And there are people who have some skills, but they're passionate enough that we can train them in the with enough quality, resources.
Yeah.
That's that's where I'm headed.
Well, I think you'll definitely get there. I think that's inevitable. I think that no matter what happens, and the obstacles that will inevitably end up in your way, I think you will overcome. I think you're just, you mentioned leadership. I think for me, there is there's only so much you can do to become a leader. You can train, you can develop, you can grow your skill set, and nobody
Yeah.
should stop trying to do that. But I just feel that inherently, some people have an innate quality of leadership, and for me, you certainly possess that. Whether that's because of your experiences or just by nature of who you are, as a person, I'm not sure, but I certainly see that quality in you, and I think that you'll do very, very well in those positions. I also think you mentioned, the pros and cons of academia and industry. I
Yeah.
think that when you come to conclude your PhD, whether it's in 2 years or 3 years, you'll have no shortage of options. There'll be a lot of people, Omri, who will want to have you on board, and I think that anybody who manages to have you as part of the team in whatever capacity would have gained a very valuable team member for more than just your technical capacity, which is, obviously beyond question at this point. You've shown that throughout this conversation, but I think they'd get a lot more than just somebody with a very strong technical skill set if they were to bring you on board. So again,
Right.
I'm sure you'll have no shortage of options. And look, for me, I think your story, if you will, is testament to the fact that anybody can achieve what they want. And for me as a recruiter, one of the questions I get a lot is, how do I get into quantum computing? What do I do? What courses do I take? And there is no perfect answer for that. I've grappled with this a lot, and I would love to have a response that I could provide to everybody and say, do this. 1 and 1 equals 2, right? And I'd like to be able to tell people, if you do this, you'll end up here. But it isn't like that. And it's dependent on what you want to do, where you want to go, what your interests are, what your skill set already is. But I think to use a very British phrase, the proof is in the pudding with you, right? You've had what I mean by that is that, you're proof of the fact that I'm trying to state. You've got from somewhere where, nobody around you would have been familiar with quantum computing in any way, shape, or form, I imagine. And then you've slowly but surely, as you said, traveled on that road and got yourself to a point where that is now what you're studying as a PhD, and will do so for many years beyond that. And so anybody who's out there wondering, how do I get into quantum, just continue to pursue your interests, continue to learn, continue to pick up, encyclopedias as you did, or continue to go to the internet. Just continue to immerse yourself and really be passionate about what it is you're doing. And I think the road that you'll follow will inevitably take you to where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think all these things keep bringing me back to linguistics, because there's like scientific communication and learning the techniques and things like that. It's just that there's so many terms that get thrown around, and some of these terms overlap, others don't. Some of them are related, some they don't look like they're related, but they actually are. They mean the same thing. like for example, something that's not quantized could be, it's basically doesn't have quantum properties in it or something like that. Just there are these terms you could say, this non, or it's like inverse, backwards, it's bidirectional, like all these terms, there's too many terms. And so you have to create sort of a linguistic tree to see which is which, and then define the differences, because I think that's what gets the most confusing in learning these kind of topics. And I see that actually linguistics does help in that regard. And I've seen it happen for some of my friends in this area, or should I say my mentees. So I have mentees now, and they tell me what their issues are as far as the learning is concerned, and I try to identify those based off of my own experiences, but then also merge that together with the problems they're facing in learning that material. Because, like for example, someone could learn mathematical techniques, but it could be straightforward. However, when it comes to the physics, words are thrown around, things get a little confusing. And it's just because of the words. The thing I realize is that when you're learning physics, or you're learning some subtopic in physics, or let's just say some STEM field, if you say the right words, it'll mean exactly what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
That's what I realized. So with me being an auditory learner, I try to catch those words and I write it down very quickly. And if I don't, I try to ask, what was that word? and then I'll write it down, make sure that's the word to use for the specific thing that's happening. And if that's not the right word, I will have to find the word for it. Because you can explain as much as you want in this community, physics community, quantum community, so forth. But if you use the wrong word by accident, then it messes everything up. Or someone will come and say, that's not correct, that's incorrect, and that's not what you meant, but you didn't use the right word. Specific, a physical thing. Yeah.
So, I agree. I think fundamentally we in the same way we spoke earlier about how things have their origins in quantum. I think it's very true that for anybody learning, the origins of whatever you're learning has to be linguistic, because your ability to communicate and to discuss is really what enables you to learn for me a lot faster rate. You can learn in isolation, you can learn in independence. It's certainly true, and anybody who is in that situation should continue to learn independently. But the biggest learning curve comes from when you discuss it with others and you have those open conversations, and that brings it back to its linguistic core. So we very much agree on that. And look, I really want to thank you for your time, Onri. I think it's been a fantastic discussion. I really enjoyed. We've spoke before for about half an hour prior to this, and I could speak to you for another 2 or 3 hours quite happily. It would be my absolute pleasure. But I want to thank you for your time. I'm very conscious of the fact that you've given a lot of it up already. Where can people find you if people want to reach out and have a conversation or ask questions? How can people get in touch with yourself?
Okay, so I have a GitHub page that I try to. On the GitHub page, you can put a lot of information on there, but the GitHub is called OJB-Quantum or OJB-Quantum, like the word quantum, all one word. If you go to that GitHub repository, you'll find like contact information on there. Otherwise, if not, the email to contact me out with questions or concerns is ojbs.name@gmail.com. Yes, because people are eventually, if they see this in the future and they say, I want to contact Onri, ask questions about something, but then that email is not up to date. See, this is my permanent email for a long time, for life.
It's another lifelong
email. Yeah, either that or let's see, another place I use very strategically. It happens to be Instagram, because I share pictures of equipment and machines and things like that on there. So that is called Onri_Jay_Benally. Yep. That's, people sometimes send me messages there, but it's basically all different kinds of channels. People message me and I answer them. I like having conversations, stuff like that.
I'm sure there'll be people that will reach out. I think that there's going to be a lot of people who want to kind of continue the discussion that we've been having and learn more about your journey as well. So, again, I really thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking again with you in the hopefully not too distant future.
All right, wonderful.
Perfect. So I wanted to wrap up there, but I also wanted to have just a kind of quick independent conversation with you, actually separate to the podcast, just to tell you a bit of a story myself. I think you've sold a lot of stories to me, so let me return the favor. So I had the pleasure of many years ago of going to Canada, and I was about, I want to say 7, maybe 8.
Okay.
Completely, yeah. It was a really interesting experience for me, and I learned a lot. And it was kind of like one of those, not my earliest memories, but certainly some of my earliest memories, which are very, very vivid and stand out very clearly. And I actually met a Native American at the time when I was in Canada, and we were at a national park, and I'm trying to wrap my brain for the name of it. I can't remember. There's another funny story there. For again, coming from the UK, we asked where's a nearby kind of national park, and this local told us, "Oh, you want to get on such and such a highway and drive for a little way, and you'll get there." about 3 hours of driving later, we arrived at our destination, and 3 hours of driving in the UK is about halfway across the country. So when we meant local, we meant within like an hour. But that's another story in of itself. So we get there. Mark, I very distinctly remember there was a cable car that went from ground level right the way up into the clouds. So from you're sitting at the bottom, the cable car kind of disappears at some point. And my mum is petrified of heights. So my memory of us going up this cable car is that I'm kind of stood there with my dad and my brother, and my mum is kind of sat down in the corner of the cable car, like just really uncontrollably crying with the heights. And it was a really interesting experience. But anyway, we get to the top of this cable car, and the point was that when you get here, there was a kind of national park, and you looked down into this there's a lovely lake, and as you described, some mountains, and the kind of scene that you would never see within the UK, kind of scene I've never seen again. And whilst we was up there, this Native American came over to my dad and started having a conversation with him. And one of the things I remember him saying very, very vividly was about my dad being an eagle, and how the women in the family are I think he said crow, maybe a raven, and they're kind of the intellect, and they'll look after the kids, and they're very mothering. And the dad is an eagle who soars above and kind of gives direction to people, and it has that protection. And for me, when I was speaking to you, I think that you are, or will be, if not already, are an eagle for a lot of people. You're somebody that people can follow. You're somebody that people can look at and can aspire to be like, and somebody who really I just think you're somebody who has that innate quality of leadership. And when I listen to you, when I hear you speak, you really do tune in. And I want to just thank you for your time independently, because for me, I think that you're a fantastic individual. And again, I think that please don't underestimate the role that you have to play as somebody who can be that eagle for so many others, and really lead, not lead them in the sense of do this, do that, but just be a beacon for people. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, definitely. All these indigenous values, they're kind of intertwined. Even as far as working on quantum, like there's this area that we talk about is like sustainability. Mm-hmm. So as indigenous people, we have this view of taking care of the earth. We call it Mother mm-hmm. Earth. And or in my language we call it Nahastzan Baka. But that is our way of having viewing the world as a personified thing. Like it's not necessarily animated, but it is, so you can animate it. And even the way we name objects, we give those names, and it makes it as if it's animated. So these principles spill on over into leadership. Same case.
So, yeah, very true.
But interestingly enough, though, in my tribe, we are a matriarchy.
Okay.
The women have a central role in a lot of things in my tribe. So they are leaders in my tribe for the most part. And that has its own path, should I say story, mm-hmm. that people can tell. And so my grandmother was definitely one of those people when she was around. But yeah. So
there's a reason we call it Mother Earth, right?
Right.
There's a reason. And I think the point you make about, we personifying the earth, I think to some extent when I don't know, maybe this is just my perspective, but when I talk about the earth, I do consider it to be a living thing. Not necessarily alive in the sense that myself or you are, but it certainly is alive in some sense. And I don't know, this is more of a philosophical question now we're grasping with, but I think there is definitely some truth in that. Absolutely. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much. It's a very interesting conversation, and
happy to be here.
I look forward to the day that we speak again.